Hmm, I think someone got lost in that jump cut. Oh, welcome back. And today we're taking a look at the final book in the Dawn of War Omnibus. It's called Dawn of War Tempest, written by C.S. Goto. Now, if you played Dawn of War Winter Assault, then you'll be a little bit familiar with some of the characters that are introduced into this story. You see, this book takes place right after the Winter Assault game, and that game assumes that you went with the Imperial Guard for that final ending. So you get to know more about characters such as General Stern and Farseer Taldair. And of course, the story continues on with the relationship between Gabriel Angelos and the Eldar that he's been in contact with throughout the first two stories. But let's not waste any time and get right into the premise of the story. As I already mentioned, it happens right after Dawn of War Winter Assault. And it seems that on planet Lorn 5, and it seems that the Imperial Guard stationed on Lorn 5 has stumbled upon some pretty interesting relics dealing with the Necron. But upon further investigation, has a stronger link towards the Eldar, and particularly the Harley Quinn. Gabriel Angelos of the Blood Ravens and the Farseers of the Eldar have a great interest in this. But that's not really the part of the story that I'm interested in. You see, if you read the second book, Ascension, you would have noticed a scene that was kind of out of place that didn't have any closure to it. A scene that had three librarians fighting off the forces of the warp. And one of the librarians, Librarian Rama, sacrifices himself by teleporting himself away with the warp entities to another unknown area. It was kind of like a random jump cut. And nobody quite knows what happened to him. But that gets explained in this book. Well, the book at the end of this big one. And that's the story that I found to be very interesting. Because you see, Rama ended up on another planet, but he had amnesia. And generally, given a character, amnesia is a pretty weak story device. I felt it worked really well in this story, because he had amnesia up to the point that he didn't even know that he was a space marine or what a space marine was. So he was discovering all these special abilities and powers he had. And through this self-exploration, you really come to have a greater appreciation of the abilities of the space marines. But that's not the only interesting part of the book. Now, as I mentioned in earlier reviews, I love fluff. I'm not going to do that gag with eating the marshmallow fluff again. I'm still kind of recovering. But this book does give you a lot of fluff and history based on the Harley Quinn and the Eldar. And as I mentioned in the last book, I think C.S. Goto really likes the Eldar. And I don't know much about the Eldar, so I can only assume that a lot of the stuff he put into this book was pretty accurate. And I found out to be pretty fascinating. But with all that said, that doesn't necessarily make this a good read. Now let's see if I could explain that better while I try to discuss the story. Now it starts with a Rama on his planet with amnesia trying to discover who he is, what he is, and where he is. And while this is going on, Gabriel's trying to figure out what happened to Rama because he finds out the librarian has kind of disappeared while the Blood Ravens were going through the warp. But of course he has no idea where the librarian is until he talks to Farseer Taldair, which for some reason now the Farseers of this particular Eldar sect just really want to seem to do a team up with Gabriel. In the first two books it was Maka, now it's Taldair, and really the amount of trust they put into this guy I just found to be kind of weird. Because in the last two books, it never ended well for any of them. But anyway, she wants to help him out, find a librarian for her own reasons, of course. And the fact that Gabriel is kind of working with Eldar is not sitting well with the other captain that's on his ship. I forget his name. He's a captain on one of the reserves. Not really important. Nothing really important happens to him except you can tell he just doesn't like Gabriel. And Gabriel doesn't really seem to be a very loved captain amongst the rest of the chapter. Because he's kind of like the maverick of the chapter. And while he's trying to find Rama ends up running into a former Chaos Sorcerer of the Thousand Suns called Ahriman. Now, Ahriman has a huge history unto himself, and they lightly touch upon in the book, just enough for you to know exactly what's going on, or why it's of any significance to Rama. But for anybody that doesn't know much about the Blood Ravens fluff, here's a few quick footnotes. The Blood Ravens have no idea where their gene seed came from. They have no idea who their Primarch is. There have been some theories that it's the Primarch of the Thousand Suns, but the Thousand Suns are Chaos Space Marine Legion, their Primarch being a Demon Prince at the moment. And while there have been some clues and hints kind of lead into this, nothing has ever been said concrete about it. In fact, there's also theories about the Blood Ravens being linked to other chapters, but nobody really knows. I guess it's that kind of mystery that makes me like the Blood Ravens even more. So for Blood Ravens fan, it's kind of a big deal that Rama ends up running into Ahriman. But Ahriman isn't really there to help out Rama. It's just kind of a coincidence that they meet. But Rama doesn't even know that Ahriman is supposed to be his enemy. He doesn't know anything about the Chaos Space Marines or the Space Marines or what Space Marines are. So some pretty interesting interaction between Rama and Ahriman. But Ahriman is only on this planet because he's trying to find some secret information. And it's a pretty weird coincidence that Rama accidentally teleported to this planet, because we later find out that this is a Harley Quinn planet. The Harley Quinn being an odd set of the Eldar. They kind of do their own thing, and this book does a pretty decent job trying to explain who the Harley Quinn are and what's their entire point. You see, the Harley Quinn are trying to get ready for the upcoming battle, and they do this by performing a play. No, I'm serious. They are up on a stage performing a play of their history with the rest of the Harley Quinn sitting in the audience watching, along with some dummies sitting in empty seats. And this is normal for them. Everything is a performance. I mean, it was kind of odd, but I was getting into it. And when Gabriel Angelos, along with the help of that Eldar, shows up to try to help Rama, he ends up in some very irritating fights. Irritating in a way that he's put into a situation that he's supposed to lose, that there's no way he could win this fight, but he does win. I kind of complained about that in the last book, but in the last book they at least complete the fight. In this book, they leave you on a cliffhanger, making it look like Gabriel's going to lose. They cut to a different scene, then they go back, and he won. You don't know how, he just did. It's kind of like,
oh no, there's no way we could ever win this fight.
Meanwhile, here's a random chapter right after that.
Back to Gabriel. Well, that was annoying. Let's move on.
I wish I could say that was an exaggeration. And it happens more than once. I'm serious. And really, a lot of the combat scenes have things that happen that just are odd. And I'm not just talking about an entire theater scene. Which, believe me, there is a battle when they fight on stage. As if it's a play. And they just go along with this. And, warning, minor spoiler, a fairly important character does end up dying, sending his allies into a rage as they charge into battle to avenge his death. But then the killer just ignores those guys and decides to fight somebody else. So then the allies are trying to avenge his death just kind of stop because they're being ignored. Why? No, really, why? And then they're just kind of over the fact that their comrade just died. I mean, there's some really good ideas in this book. I love where they were going with Rama. It's the thing with his amnesia and meeting with Ahriman of the Thousand Suns. There's a lot going on in the storyline, but it just never really paid off. And then the relationship with Gabriel and the Farseer Eldars just didn't really make much sense. I wasn't buying it at all. I mean, really, how many planets does he need to doom before you get the hint? And then not to mention how awkward a lot of the battles are in this book. Just kind of resolving themselves off panel. It's very frustrating, especially in the past two books. There were some decent fighting scenes. It just feels like this book was really rushed, or very heavily edited, and still rushed. For me, I found it very disappointing because there was so much they could have worked with on this. There was just so many good ideas, but then they just kind of gave up on it. And I think it's a very poor way to end the series. I thought the first two books were okay, but this last one just deserves a punch. Wait. I don't have them individually, I just got the omnibus. But as the entire omnibus goes, I still think it's worth it, at least for the first two stories. You get some good backstory, you get some good fluff, you get to know the Blood Ravens, my favorite chapter, and you get to know a lot about Eldar and the Harley Quinn if you decide to read the third book. But that's enough about the Blood Ravens for now. Next week is going to be another CSGO to a book. And if you thought I was going to light on the book punches these past few weeks, tune in for next week. Spoiler. But those are my opinions. Take them for what they're worth.